Good day, good day. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Jay, and this is Homeschool Yo Kids Podcast. Before we get started, make sure y'all check out homeschoolyourkidsexpo.com. Check out our lovely traveling expo schedule coming to a city near you. And major shout outs to Classical Conversations, one of our proud sponsors. They're a curriculum provider and support for homeschool families. So make sure you check out them. And today we have with us Lynn. Lynn, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Lynn Aronoff. I am the executive director of PACE, Parent Advocates for Choice in Education. We are an organization that is our mission is to tell parents stories about how they have guided their children's education, with the idea that parents, grandparents, guardians are the people who should be making the decisions about kids' education and not the government or your zip code or anything
Mm,
like that.
yes. Okay. Let's talk about it because that's my little my steez. That's where I'm at with things. Like parents definitely should be the in front in the forefront. Understanding that they know their children the best and they are going to make the best choices for them on their behalf, as long as they're informed choices. So you say you provide stories.
Yes, we are looking for stories always, and we are just beginning our campaign actually because we've got quite a stockpile of stories. It's the campaign to send the stories to legislators in Michigan, and Michigan is in a unique situation because we have very little school choice. So the things that are happening, the choices that are being made, are really important. They're very intentional, and the parents who are most affected by not having choice are in urban settings, as we're seeing, or that's a sort of a new thing that's happened during the pandemic. I think really highlighted that a lot of folks in these urban settings that have public schools that are failing their kids are taking the education into their own hands. They were home for 18 months. They saw how their kids were taught or not. And I firmly believe, and Pace believes, that every parent would want to be present at their kid's school. Every parent is concerned with how their child is being educated, but it's like an economic factor. If they can volunteer at lunch or what, I know I can't, I'm working full time, so but parents care. And what they heard for 18 months was pretty appalling. And if they didn't already know that it wasn't working out as far as their children actually learning to read, uh, life changed. And there are really incredible things happening on the ground in Michigan. Parents that are forming co-ops, homeschooling their kids, either themselves or with co-ops, micro schooling. There's just, when you have a situation of restriction, it's incredible to see the beauty that is blossoming in all of these places. And the faces, the people whose stories are important are the constituents of these legislators that are deciding they want to cap charter schools, or they want a homeschool registry, or they want to get in there and regulate even more what should really be a family decision. Every kid is different. And when you homeschool your child, as you know, Jay, better than I can even explain, because I don't homeschool my child, is the thing is that um, your child gets an individualized learning plan. And many, many, many kids need that. And they get an even better education. They excel, as do all, not all, but many kids who are homeschooled. You see them doing dual enrollment and all kinds of wonderful things, creative learning things. Their test scores are good. In the urban centers, the issue at hand is transcripts being believed, which is real crazy. But that's something that the ISDs, want to come into the home to see how these kids are living, to validate if it's true that they succeeded in the ways that their transcript is showing they succeeded. So, there's ever more things to fight as we go, but we want to make sure that no matter what, legislators have to look these parents in the eye before they make these decisions. The stories are not polished, they're not real comfortable.
Mm.
They're really important, and they're not like what anybody else in the school choice movement is showing these folks. These voices need to be heard. So with our partnerships, we are able to elevate the stories so that they're seen, and respectfully partner in different communities so that we're bringing the important stories to light and showing them to the people who need to see them.
Nice.
That was
Okay,
a
so
very long answer to a very short question.
I don't
Apologies.
no worries. I don't even remember the question, but that was an awesome answer. So it doesn't even matter. However, okay, so you say Michigan is one of the states that lack school choice. Is it because it has not been introduced, or is it because they keep shooting things down? Is
They
it
keep shooting things down. We have
okay?
an amendment in our state constitution that is really difficult to unravel. It's called the Blaine Amendment, and it really takes changing the constitution and it's very of the state, and it's very, very difficult to do it. So there have been a couple tries to do ballot initiatives, to create student savings accounts so that the money can follow the kids, which really obviously makes sense. It's you're paying taxes, your money
Indeed.
should follow your child wherever you go. But it's something that is fought against so hard in Michigan. I think it has to do also with being a very strong union state.
Mm.
It's a pity because all around us, the states have a lot more school choice than we have. Um, and so Michigan, by its rules, has less ability to have school choice than not than anybody else, but right at the bottom. And our scores are horrible. Our test
Mm.
scores, we just got more scores back. I mean, our kids don't know how to read in this state. It's absolutely appalling.
Well, I will say, Lynn, that's all the states. As literacy is a national crisis that is just being
Yeah.
swept and swept and swept. It's getting talked about per se, I guess, but it's still being swept because it's like, okay, we come to a nation of dysfunctioning illiterate individuals. And no one's really like pinpointing, well, where all these illiterate people come from.
Well, and what about phonics being taught? And I mean, there's all kinds of issues, but I do want to say, and I know that your podcast is about homeschooling from Pace's perspective. We're fans of all kinds of schooling if it's
Oh
working.
yes,
You know what I mean?
indeed.
So
Oh
like
yeah, no, we're supportive. All yeah, no, we
my child goes to a brick and mortar public school. But I did do school of choice because I was living in a neighboring community and I was able to get him into the schools here and then eventually move here about 6 years later. Um, and his school could go up against any school anywhere, or any micro school, or any homeschool co-op, or, I mean, it's been great for him. I don't know about every
nice.
single kid there, but this has been a wonderful, wonderful experience for him. And I recognize that that exists, but his elementary school could go up against a charter school, could move in next door, and people would still choose Pat and Gill Elementary in Berkeley, Michigan, because it is perfect for a kid that it's perfect for and it
Yes,
exists for,
indeed.
so it's not that. And we want to hear all the stories of parents that are doing all kinds of education, parochial. I don't think a lot of people know that if you go to a religious school and ask them about grants and things like that, there's a lot of assistance that you can utilize to enroll your child in what would possibly seem to be cost prohibitive, but there's all kinds of solutions that folks within those communities are doing to support their schools and make sure that kids are able to access them.
Indeed. No, I'm glad you pointed that out. I will say, and I feel like I have to do this disclaimer all the time, but homeschooling to me means no matter where your child is, as far as school setting goes, you should be teaching your child at home. You should be leading your children's education. So it's not always on the sense of, oh, your child needs to be removed. It's an awareness, like you said, about those 18 months that parents had their children at home and they were able to see, okay, this is what's taking place inside of the classroom. um, that should draw a lot of attention to the needed partnerships within within homes and schools. parent involvement is a lack. Very, 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 very much of a lack. That was one of the biggest issues that I've seen. I just did an interview with the founder of Toddlers Can Read, Spencer Russell, and that was what he pointed out too. He was a kindergarten teacher, and he talked about the lack of parent involvement even at that level. So understanding that parent involvement is important. Like no matter what setting your child is in, your child needs you to lead their educational journey.
Well, and there's all different, and you know better than most, there's all different ways to homeschool,
Yes.
whether it's completely or mixture with public. But you know, there's so many curriculums available. There's also, you know, I know somebody who homeschooled her son for a few years in high school. This was like 20 years ago, and so there wasn't curriculum and all that stuff around, but they would go on a field trip every day, and she'd say, okay, who, what, where, why, when. And at the end of 3 years, he tested great and he
Oh, I'm
learned and he
sure.
appreciated learning. For me, my child is young, he's 12. The most important thing for me was making sure that he learned to read at the right time for him, not at the right time when, you know, schools or whoever tells you that they should be reading, but I didn't want it to be a struggle for him because I love reading so much. I want him to be able to, you know, go on an adventure reading a book and not shy away from it because it didn't click at the right moment. Now that he can read, I just leave it alone. I trust the teachers and let it go. But when everything shut down, we did a series of webinars talking to parents who do homeschool, whether they homeschool 100%, whether they're not working in homeschooling or working full time in homeschooling or homeschooling because they want to travel for a year with their kids and drive across the country, or, you know, all of these different scenarios so that people weren't intimidated by, you know, because when everything shut down, if you weren't already homeschooling or doing anything like that, I mean, you had to be like all the rest of us going, oh my God, what am I going to do? And
Right.
there's so many ways to teach your children. And just being interested, exactly what you're saying, is like the most important communication in their education journey, that they have someone watching who's interested, pointing stuff out, taking them places, talking about things, reading to them. It's all really important. And people are busy, parents are busy, and it's scary to think you're adding more. But breaking it down and how you do it, I think, is important.
Indeed. And you spoke on that early on too about the economic, status of the world. Um, just how everything has been definitely geared towards like a hustle, like we're in a hustle bustle, basically. Like everyone's like trying to stay above the water. It's like, oh, the water's here, like we here. Like everybody
Right.
is just, barely making it above. And so, like you said, adding something else on their plate is a lot. It is a lot, but our kids got to mean that much because they're the ones that are going to be running everything, or the future of everything. And so it's like, okay, if we don't give them up, then what are we preparing ourselves for as a whole? Like where are
Well,
we going to
that's the
go?
thing. And you know, I think, I hope that my son's generation is going to save the world because we've had a couple of gap generations in between without strong motivations. And, you know, it's really hard as an employer. I don't have I contract with clients, so I don't have any employees, but I have had at different times, and like, you know, that you don't want to hire somebody in their 20s, not in their 20s right now, because that generation sort of isn't motivated and they don't feel that they need to show up. And you know, our kids now, the little ones now coming up, they got to save us from all of that. There's apathy, there's all kinds of struggle. You know, we got to raise kings and queens, all of us, because they got to right the ship. There's so much craziness going on. We need them to be strong, strong leaders.
I think purpose driven. I feel like Like we have a generation that like kind of fell by the wayside, kind of didn't like get poured into enough as far as understanding that they are that important. I talk about my last couple of years teaching, I was teaching seniors and just how down they were. Like I, they were depressed. Like most of my seniors, I feel like as a whole, like they were in a dark place. And of course they were during the time of the shutdown and everything. And this my last senior class, they didn't have what ring dance, they didn't have the junior formal, they didn't have prom. They didn't have all the things that they had been waiting patiently for as approaching senior year. And so their drive about things were just really like sad. It was sad. Um
Well, that's a
and
whole new, the mental suffering, the damage that was done for the teenagers during COVID, during the shutdown. It was so, and in many instances where the only person consistently seeing them was an educator, and then that was cut off. And where
indeed.
do they go? It's going to be insane how these kids, God willing, that they find the strength to persevere and to push through and to find their way, because the disruption is we're not going to see the repercussions of that in full for a while, and it's absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, I feel like the mental like I feel like the conversations are being had. So I feel like, we're talking about things like people are talking about the traumas, people are talking about just pain in general. Therapies being promoted, just finding what works is being promoted in regards to just everything, lifestyle in general. Like, hey, if this isn't working for you, then try this. Or if this isn't panning out for you, then try this. Um, I feel like a lot of people are still like waiting on permission to like be them, like, feel like them. And I guess that could be in sense of like social media, because social media is so prevalent and it is what it is as far as shaping and thoughts and um what people feel is normal or people feel are the standards. And so that's why hearing that you all collect stories and share them with legislators, that's pretty dope. Like as far as like, hey, no, you need to hear from these people firsthand why school choice matters, why being able to make these choices for their family really, really matters to them. And boom, we got some for you. We got some stories for you.
Well, and when you talk about school choice, it immediately everybody goes to the politics of it. So you must be from this party, or you must look like this, or you must. And the cool thing about PACE is that we're completely bipartisan. I mean, we're not political at all. We're not branded. We're not on any side, and our partners reflect that. My background is in campaign work that I did for a million years, and or it felt like it. And I did coalition work, and that's really bringing people in together. Like people are comfortable coming in with other people who are like them, and then working together. And we're doing that, but I'll get too much into the sausage making, so I'll try and be really brief. I could go on forever and why I think this is so important, but instead of going into communities and taking what you need and then running back out the door, we're not in that business. We're partners with folks in different communities, and we're trying to give back to them resources. So that's our part of the relationship. Two things is, number one, being able to elevate the stories so that people who make decisions are unable to look away. And number two, we do things like like the unconference. We do things like we have a education expo that we partnered with in Kalamazoo, which is another part of Michigan that already existed. Our idea, hopefully dream, is to duplicate it in different areas, but making it easier for parents to see what the choices are. Because when it's your kid, you think you're all alone, no matter what. I was working in education when the shutdown happened. I was working in education choice, and I'm still like, oh my God, what am I going to do? It's my kid, but to build community, build a place to meet, film these conversations so that people can see them, with people like Bernita Bradley, with people who are doing interesting, fabulous things. That's our part of the bargain, is trying to make it easier for folks and trying to build some community. And the cool thing also is that we're not leaving at the end of the campaign cycle. Our relationships continue on in perpetuity. And so it seems to me to be the most respectful approach. And it's also been extremely fruitful. So we're thrilled. We don't want to be labeled by anybody. We're going to talk to all the legislators. We're going to show the stories. God willing, we get to a point where we're able to line up constituents with the legislators. Like, this person actually does live in your community here, and not just residents of Michigan. Um,
Yeah.
Hopefully to get that specific in the future. But um, you know, I don't even want, in the emails that we're sending to them, I'm fighting with our public relations folks because I don't even want any words. I just want them to see faces. I just want those
Mm.
stories. I want the mouths opening and the stories coming out. And they're telling me it'll be marked as spam, and we got to have something. I'm like, we're not saying dear legislators. That is
Yeah.
disingenuous. Not dear, so um it's an ever evolving mission, but I think that the approach is super important because it's about kids and it's about families, and it is not about a party or any kind of
Yeah.
platform.
It wasn't until last year that it was brought to my attention, because I stay that far removed from the political realm, that school choice was a political thing. Like, it wasn't
Yeah,
until last year that I learned that, oh, okay, that's supposed to be on a one party side or whatever. And
right.
it's just like, choice. Y'all are politicizing choice, like something that is just a birthright. Like,
Yeah.
choice should be a birthright. There shouldn't be any kind of like party agreement. There shouldn't have to be anything for people to exercise their freedom of choice. This is supposed to be a free land. This is supposed to be a free country, all
Well,
that good
yeah.
stuff.
And
So
it's
choice is free. Like, that's what that entails. I feel like choice means free. I don't
yeah,
know.
it does. And it's been co-opted into different philosophies and or political philosophies, political ideologies. It has no business in there. Um, and it's on both sides. Friends of mine who work for public schools were posting during, and this was the Michigan um, education, I'm completely forgetting the names, association, MEA. They were reposting things that the MEA was putting out. And basically the message was, support your public school or it won't be here when you need it. Well,
Mm,
that's not a
pretty
good
heavy.
message.
Yeah,
Maybe it
like,
shouldn't be
where
there.
they going?
Well, and if they get out of business because there are no kids there, think about it. Why are there no kids there? Instead of trying to incentivize them coming back, the parents are choosing not to send them back. Why? Figure out. I mean, you can't do things because the same way because you always did them that way. And I think that's what you're talking about in people having fresh eyes. I think that's what we have to do in terms of so many issues in education, not the least of which is, idolizing this 4-year liberal arts education. That may be great for some kids, but you know what? Being a welder is a really good career. And there are all kinds of really great trades and all kinds of options. And we gotta be open and make it easy for people. You come out of a trade school, like in Michigan, the one I know that's in Southeast Michigan, you come out of SEMCA and you don't have any debt and you're
Mm.
employed, and something that will be kind of recession proof, like it's a good plumbing, like these are honorable, like very upwardly mobile careers. And we've got to stop prioritizing one above the other. We have to look at things
Indeed.
differently. We have to look at what our society needs and what our kids need and what motivates them. If you came out of high school and you weren't learning well and you would come all this way and then maybe your school closed down, and no wonder there's a pack of depressed 20-year-olds who don't show up for work, but we've got to look at it different. And you're 100% right. The whole world is open. Figure out what you like and go for it. And
I
if your
mean, I
parents
feel
to
like
help
that
you,
should be. Yeah.
I
Oh
mean,
no.
I
Go
told my
ahead.
son what his education path is. I told him years ago, I'm like, here's where you're going to go to college, and then you're going to, he's just like, no, I'm not.
Good job, son. Good
I
job.
see the motive, I see the incentive to do it like it's an ego thing, but it's about them and what makes them feel good. And if you don't succeed at something, you don't feel good about things and you don't have a
Indeed.
good life. Succeeding at something is very important. And that's why in these
Indeed.
school situations, if they don't have music and they don't have the arts or they don't have these things that could be the one thing that a kid lights their fire, if they don't get exposed to that stuff, then they don't have anything. And that's unacceptable. And any parent will tell you it's unacceptable. You want a fire to be lit in your kid in whatever direction. You want them to love something.
Yes, ma'am. And you hit it like early on. If something's not working, it has to be challenged. By all means, I feel, and as a former public school teacher, I feel like the whole fear mongering of, oh, if you don't value your public school is going to be gone. No, it's not. It's already overcrowded. Like it's not going anywhere. The classrooms are already like to the max. Like I had students who didn't have chairs. Okay. So understand that no, there's not no shortage. Like the shortage of teachers, maybe qualified or good teachers, passionate teachers, that may become a thing, a major issue. But students, no, people are having kids all the time. Like nephew got six yourself. Like it's like
That's
no,
true.
like kids are not going anywhere. Please understand that. And that is a real like that's terrible fear mongering of oh well like if you support homeschool or if you support a school choice in general where people are able to send their children whatever works for them, then that's a bad thing. No, it's not. Like
No,
that's
and the teachers don't think it's a bad thing. Educators don't think it's a bad thing. If a child's needs can be met with a more individualized plan provided by their parent or supplemented by their parent, that's a great thing. That
it
nobody's in
is.
competition for that. It's somehow, and like in Michigan, we have this really high per pupil amount of money we spend. It's not getting in the classrooms. Like every teacher I've ever known is buying their own art supplies, even in, you know, wealthy areas. We got to tear it down and rebuild it so that it's good enough for our kids. It's just not good enough. I mean,
Man,
in a blue moon, it's good enough, but it's not good enough as a whole, and it's not the right philosophy. And I mean, educators should be rewarded for success, not for years serving. There are people doing the stories I heard from educators throughout COVID and going around to different schools, different charter schools, and talking to folks. They went to kids' houses. They stood across the street because they knew that they were the only one who was seeing the kid really, and they wanted to make sure. These are people that love the kids like we love our kids. We've got to open the door so they can do what they think is right, and they can be compensated and rewarded to the appropriate degree that they should be, and somebody over them isn't necessarily paid more, and all of that. It's just got to be rethought. It's not working well enough.
indeed. And I feel like we should follow the money more closely because I don't feel like school systems per se are lacking funds. Like I've never felt that. I felt like they may misdirect funds. They may, have it proportioned in different directions that maybe it doesn't need to be, perhaps. But the lacking of funds that, they make it seem like schools are I don't think that's a thing. Like, I'm sure some districts, of course, like there's some poorly funded schools, there's some poorly or underserved schools, per say that, but the funds are there. It's just who's getting those funds, because it's not going to the educators, not going to the teachers in the classroom. Like, they're getting the bare, like literally the bare minimum. So
Right.
that could be a place to start, actually valuing the ones who are in the forefront with the kids, and ensuring that they're well supported. Like you said, like that should not still be a thing that teachers have to buy their supplies. I was a teacher buying my supplies. My
Mm-hmm.
nephew just he was just like, well, you've been out the classroom for a long time. 2021, like it ain't been that long, like really. I'm sure a lot has changed, per se, because 4 years in our lovely technology driven world is a lot now. So I know a lot has changed, but it's still the same, really. Like, although a lot
Yeah.
has changed, it's still the same.
Oh, yeah. Listen, the kids in Detroit still don't have internet. They're
Mm.
still, I mean, some do, but a lot don't. And these basic problems have not been solved. And they're, I've been in my, I don't know. I don't even know how to say this without being completely offensive. But here we are. I think that you get all these people who are not dealing with their own money.
Mm.
When it's your money and your bottom line, you know exactly where everything is spent and how it's spent, and it's going to the right places. Or if it's not, it's not, and then you correct it. This is people dealing with other people's money, and it's all muddied up. And I just I'm a bottom line kind of person. And if you have a bunch of kids not learning, you shouldn't be getting funding. And the funding should follow these children. It is theirs. It's paid by their parents. They should be able to have it follow them. The great things that have happened in the states that have these student savings accounts, it creates a whole other economy. I mean, there's so many wonderful things that can happen. Um, it's ludicrous that we keep supporting schools that are failing and then fight, oh, charter schools or the people who own them make $1 million. They don't make anything and they have as much oversight. This is just excuses. All that matters is where a kid can learn. If a kid can learn there, it's a
Yeah,
good place. And if kids can't learn there, it isn't good. And that's it. But there's so many
indeed.
grown-ups in the way of that thinking. It's not about them, and I don't care to hear about the grown-ups in the equation. It's not important. Important is kids not being able to read, kids
Yes,
not feeling
ma'am.
like they have a future, entire
Yes, ma'am.
generations kind of lost. That's important. How the
Yes,
grown-ups are
ma'am.
treated in the education system, I don't care at all.
Indeed, indeed. I It was wild when the shutdown happened, because I was at a Title I school. Um, when the shutdown happened, our kids were not one to one as far as technology goes. They didn't have laptops. So when they went home with them, like just them and some packets. Like, we were asked to put packets together for the kids, and they were sent home with that. It took about a good 2 to 3 weeks for all the kids to get laptops that were in a basically like a closet. Like, they had just had them stored away. They had them. They had the one-to-one devices. They even had the little internet boxes that they were able to send home with the kids too. But it was like a wonderance of, well, why didn't they already have them? Why was these just sitting there?
Yeah.
Why were they just being stored away collecting dust?
Because if
Why
it
was
was
that a
your money
thing?
and you bought them, you'd know where they were and you'd have them in the right hands. It's just this bloated bureaucracy. I'm not for that in terms of anything, but especially not with my kid.
Indeed. Indeed.
Mm.
So, okay, you all collect these stories. How do y'all reach out to these? I know, because we're not gonna but we are gonna do this because you're gonna think about it.
No,
Look,
I'm
you're
like,
gonna
can we
think
change
about
the
it.
world? Let's not get down to things that make sense. Let's talk about how horrible everything is for a while.
um, yeah, no, because I just always want people to understand, like, the money is there. There's not an issue of money. Like I just don't like that narrative. I don't like that they've been using that narrative for so long, like that
Right.
there's an issue of money. No, it's not. It's the issue of how the money's being used. And like you said, if it was yours to be like dished out, or if you were the one personally buying, or you had purchased a laptop for your child for them to store away, then you would have been asking, what's his laptop? Where's his laptop? Right. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
laptop at? Like, it would have been a conversation, but because we're not there to do the checks and balance, so we're not seeing the receipts, we're not understanding or knowing about the purchases in general, then the questions aren't being asked. So I
Right.
always follow the money, but the money should definitely follow the child.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy for it not to. Well, PACE is, our website is mipace.org. There are ways to easily find, first of all, our resource page, which has a lot of good stuff on it for Michigan-based families. And there's also a way to submit your story. There, we have a really active Facebook page because Facebook is where the parents are. Like these parent groups are revolutionizing the world. The moms of wherever, they're like
Right.
changing history. And so we do a lot on there. And so you're able to submit any stories there, find interesting articles, click to our previous events to see our webinars and things like that. And really the directions for recording a story are really simple. We don't want anything fancy. We don't want it super edited, and we don't want background music. We just want a cell phone and a person talking and telling their truth. That is the most important thing. It doesn't matter what your backdrop is or how good of quality. And sometimes we just use voiceovers from it, but getting the truth of the parents out there is our mission, and making sure that folks who make decisions that affect our kids are looking these parents in the eye, literally. So if you know any parents in Michigan, if you have an insanely amazing school choice thing that you want to record, but you're not from Michigan, send it. I'll figure out a way to use it. But encourage your friends and family who are exercising school choice to make a difference by letting their voices be heard. Let us elevate those voices. We commit to you to be very respectful in how we handle what is really sacred territory, and that is you talking about your child.
Mhm.
We feel the importance of it as much as you do, and we want to make sure that we can change the education system in Michigan for the better, or at least not
Yeah.
let it get worse. Now we're fighting on
Indeed.
defense, but hopefully at some point we get to be in offense again.
Right. Are you all looking to expand outside, like, and do this nationally? Because I feel like this is a great
Listen, I think it's a model in terms of how we've been able to collect the kind of stories that we have. I think it's a model that people should be doing everywhere, but we just invented it like 3 years ago.
okay.
Not ready to go national yet. But this is, in Michigan, after our last fight of trying to get a ballot initiative going to get the money to follow the kids, a lot of people gave up in Michigan, the people fighting for education choice, because we are so tied into this Blaine Amendment. But the one thing that continues to be important is collecting the stories, because it's the only thing that will matter when we are able to fight again, and to stop any kind of damage, any further damage to the education system here. Um, I'm now lost in what I was just saying. But yeah, I mean, of course, I'd want to go do it nationally. I think it's a method, a model that works. But first, let's change the world in Michigan, and then we'll go
Yes.
national.
Yes. No, you got to start home first. Definitely understand that. I just feel like narratives are needed because
Yes.
narratives are so um they're structured to fit whoever's controlling it. Um
Well, and
and
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just
Mhm.
remember that I forgot to make this point when we're talking about it being affiliated with a political party, school choice. The
Mm,
only thing that breaks through that is a parent. because if I go in and talk about it, I'm a parent and I have utilized school choice, but I work in the school choice realm. So if I walk in a room and start talking about it, they're going to be like, oh, are you a Republican? And blah, 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 blah. The stories are the only things that actually speak, that aren't tainted with, party politics and all that. It's the only way to change somebody's mind. Otherwise, you sound like you're pitching for one party or the other. And nobody, it doesn't move the ball forward at all. The stories are
Indeed.
the valuable thing.
Yes, yes. And I feel like narrative, like you sharing your narrative is very important. That's hence the platform. Because it's conversation and people need to see like people that look like them sharing their situation. Oh, you have an issue too? Like, because we get so caught up in our world that we think that whatever it is that we're experiencing or our issues that we're having is just our issue to have. It's not something that the everyone else, their average, or the rest of the world is having. It's like, no, it's a thing. This is a very, very big issue for a lot, for many, for most,
Well,
really.
I think when it's your child, it's like you can be a person in the world and you understand that you're not alone in this and all this, but all of a sudden you get this like tunnel vision. It's just your baby. My baby isn't
Yes.
learning. What do I do? I'm stuck. I'm scared. What's going to happen? And, finding community in that, it's so important. It's so
Yes.
important. We have parents who show up for the Kalamazoo Expo and burst into tears because they see so many resources in front of them. And, one grandma who has the special needs kid who is just about to get kicked out. And what's she going to do? And this is a sweet boy who doesn't mean anything bad, but he's a 13-year-old boy who's a little bit out of control. And then she can see all these resources and think, oh, his life isn't going to be over. He likes to
Yeah.
play the piano. I can get him a piano teacher. They have this co-op thing for that. And I can get his curriculum and, just hear about and see what the options are, relieves so many people. It's amazing. I wish we could have every person in the world walk into one of those expos if you have a kid it's not working where they are, to see that there are so many other ways to do this.
Yes.
Don't give up. Just
Yes.
get more
That's
involved.
being informed is a big thing because there's a lot of people who aren't even privy to the school choice conversation at all, or to even think that it's a thing. I shared that I know this like a year or two ago. I was at the park in New York, in Brooklyn, New York, and a parent, I was talking to him about homeschooling, of course, and she was like, oh, I didn't think that was a thing we could do. I thought that was just during the shutdown. I didn't think we could still homeschool our kids afterwards. And it's like, yeah, no, that's the thing, love. Like, y'all, like, you're able to do that here, and here, here's some resources and things like that. But it's just, you don't know how much people don't know until you have those conversations, because it's like, oh shucks, no, I didn't know this was a thing. Oh, I didn't know this organization even existed, or I didn't even know that I can do this.
Yeah.
And it's like, because we're so programmed to think like, oh, 5 years old, public school, 5 years old, public school, like, that's a norm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, being in
Yeah.
education is definitely brings more awareness to you as far as what you know to be the options out there. But being a parent, I always say we don't get sent home with little manuals with those little new babies, those bundles. They just give you a couple diapers and look, some Similac.
Listen, I adopted my son, so I had to go to classes. I had to get
Oh,
licensed.
okay.
And still they handed me this baby and I'm like, what am I supposed to do? What now?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
you don't have a manual and every person is different and your kid is their own person and it's complicated. And when you think homeschool, you think, which is exactly why you named your group what you named your podcast what you named it. We have a perception of who homeschools, and it's Christian, far right, white people. and they can afford to have absolutely no government involvement and go off the grid. And they're worried they don't want government involvement. They don't want to be told how to teach. They all the same motivation, um, but they look a certain way. Maybe they have a long skirt. I don't know, whatever is the stereotype, right? But then you see what's going on all over the place. But until you see someone who looks like you, until you
Yeah.
see that it's not just those folks. It's a lot of different kinds of people who just have, like a kid, it wasn't working out at where was the easiest place to send him. It just wasn't good enough or whatever, but it's hard to think about doing something if you don't know anybody else in your whole sphere of influence who's done it. So we're trying to like highlight and show the faces so that everybody sees something in common, and they don't feel alone. It's really important. It's a scary
Yes.
thing to raise a human, and like our whole lives depend on them being better than us and leaders, and it's a lot. It's a big responsibility.
Right. And then that also comes in to play when you also have to heal your trauma associated with the school. Like, because we, we went through whatever we went through, and it's like, okay, well, I don't want to carry this on, but it's kind of got me in a chokehold where I don't even want to go up to your school because that teacher still worked there that taught me, and like she was mean.
Yeah.
And, so it's like, we don't talk enough about the trauma that parents have in association with the education system that they went through. Um,
Well, I think that's why, like, the superintendent in Detroit was able to felt he was okay bullying parents during the
mm,
shutdown, because he was depending on their collective trauma to not say, wait a minute, what are you talking? It's it's not okay. None of that stuff is okay. It needs to be dismantled. It's not any good. You can't treat kids like that. You can't. They were trying to shame families, and I'm sure it's just because I know people there. That's a area that's close to my house, so I actually know people there. But I
mm,
know that it's going on in Saginaw, Michigan. I know that it's going on in Pontiac, Michigan. I know it's going on in these places that they're just depending on parents not doing anything.
mm.
And then you have the opposite, like in a neighboring community to where I live, where the parents are so overly involved, it's horrifying, and I feel bad for everybody that works in the school.
I know. And
But
then they want y'all to find hobbies and stop coming up to their school so much. Like, hey, you don't have nothing to do. Like, you
yeah,
got nowhere
right.
else to
We don't
volunteer.
need you today.
Right. Yes. And because I've heard those stories where it's like, oh, elementary was gung ho, like, oh, they were so appreciative. Then my baby got to middle school and they're like, can you stop coming up here so much?
Yeah.
Like, why are you here? It's like, because he's still my baby. Like, what do you mean? Like, I'm here. He's here. I'm here. But that's a type of involvement, like, you want to have. But going back to the economic status, where it's a lot of parents that are working 2, 3 jobs at
Hmm.
minimum to just barely get by. And by all means, when they are off, it's like, oh, I'm tired, girl. I gotta catch up on some sleep right now. Like, oh, you in school, you in school. Um, and they would like to be more involved, but there's some barriers there. So it's
Right.
like trying to find that healthy balance, and just understanding how important you are in general. I feel
Yeah.
like parents have to hear that and have to really embody their need. Like, hey, love, like don't ever pass off that cap. Like, don't ever think that you're not the most qualified teacher for your children, and don't ever think that they won't value you. I feel like that's a big thing. I used to have a lot of students tell me that they talk to me more than they talk to their parents. And I used to be like, no, that shouldn't be. Like, we're not even together that long. Like, then there's like 25 of y'all in here. Like, how is that?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Parents have to understand how important they are to their children.
Well,
They have to.
and in these stories, like what we want to get to the point where we are awarding them, they're champions. Parents are doing incredible things. And it's one thing to go into and talk about the failing public schools and all kinds of problems there and parents overburdened and not able to address stuff, but you've got so many that are. like celebrating those folks that are and showing their faces to the world so that other people can see, and also
Agree.
having conversations with them about their methodology, because everyone needs it broken down. You got to figure out how to actually, like, really, is it just 5 minutes of reading to them each night? It totally is 5 minutes of reading to them each night. Like that's or 10 minutes at the max when they're real little. Like it means everything. It makes a huge difference. But yeah, like celebrating the folks that are doing the super cool things. We're seeing it with micro schools, like they're teaching kids in trees, and they're learning to color with flowers and the dye from flowers, and doing math with like mud pies, and it's fantastic for the right kind of kid. There's just all kinds of models out there of stuff that already exists, and the world is open to creating your own thing. It's amazing how resilient the kids are and how much they absorb from everything, especially if you're paying attention to them. They absorb
Indeed.
everything.
They really do. And I tell like, regardless of whether you think you're modeling or not, please understand your children are either seeing and seeing the positive, or they're seeing and they're seeing the negative. Either way, know that they're seeing. Okay. Those kids are watching. They are watching. They are watching hard. Even if it's just
When
to say, well, Mom, you said this, but I saw you doing this the other day. Like,
Oh,
they
I'm always
watching.
like, why did I teach you how to talk? When did that was a huge mistake.
Lynn, since my daughter, my oldest, was 6 months old, I used to tell her, use your words. I don't know what you're saying. Use your words. And Lynn, she started using them at 2, honey, real, real good. And it was like, wait, stop using those words.
I knew that I wanted a baby when I adopted my baby. I wanted a baby, and that's all I could think about. I always love a baby. I did not count on this person growing up.
Right? That's what
Now
I
I've got a
think.
person who follows me around and cracks up at everything I do, and then like
Oh,
calls me out on a bunch of stuff. I didn't I didn't
everything.
think about this part.
Right? It's like, oh, you did have to grow up, huh? Like,
Oh,
we're
it's
here.
heartbreaking.
Yes, my 11-year-old, she wants us to be the same age so bad. Like she wants us to share clothes. She wants us to like, talk about that. And like
Oh,
that is, oh yeah, she adores, adores, adores. And that's why I always say, like, they go too hard for me not to go hard for them, like in all
yeah.
that I do. Cause they definitely go hard for me. And so that's why I want like parents to understand the unconditional love your child has for you,
Oh, and trust. They
and
trust that you're going to
trust.
handle things for them.
Yes, yes, yes. Because I tell them driving. Oh my gosh, the trust that y'all have because y'all keep asking me questions while I'm trying to focus in this traffic right now is crazy. Like, wait a minute, because don't you care about our safety? It's raining out here. Why are you asking me to look at something right now? Like who do you think I am? What is this? What is this? I care about our safety, so I'm gonna just keep looking forward. Okay. Um, yes, but yes, no, the trust is definitely there. That's why I like having these conversations because parents have to understand like their value.
Oh yeah.
They
Yeah.
have to understand their value and just how dope they are, how they're viewed in their child's eye until they show them otherwise. Like your child adores you. They really do. They really, really do. I feel like that's just a thing. They come out the womb like, oh shucks, like, you're
Yeah, oh
so
yeah. And
cool.
I remember
You're
staring in
so
my
cool.
mom, right. I remember staring in my mom's face and just thinking, I want to memorize every part. And I would just look at everything. I just adored her. And I see
Aw.
my kid doing it too. Like they want to follow everything you're doing. I mean, mine wants to not follow everything I'm doing, but it's the same kind of thinking. And I mean, I really appreciate you saying that. I adopted my son later in life, so I'm an old mom. So I'm like, I appreciate the levity or the gravity, not the levity, the gravity that a parent play. And I'm a single mom. I adopted him on my own, and I know that I'm the make or break situation going on in this house. Like this is And when I was switching his school and applying for him for school of choice, I thought, now I'm social engineering for him. What if I'm wrong?
Oh my
But
gosh.
I knew I
Yeah.
was right. And I questioned myself, but I moved forward and I knew in my gut, I know where my kids should be.
Good
And
job.
it wasn't like a decision between something that was horrible and something that was going to be okay. Where we were was not going to be horrible. It wasn't going to be unsafe. There wasn't an epidemic of kids not learning how to read. It was all right, but it just wasn't quite right. And I
Mm,
just knew it wasn't quite right. Um, and I would never go against a parent that has that gut feeling. The worst thing is when you have the gut feeling and you can't make it happen. Like he didn't get
mm,
into the school of choice right away, and it was a whole thing. And I called the woman who was running the lottery and I said, look, I can't buy a house right now, but I can buy a car. What do you want? My kid needs to
mm.
be there and I will do anything. What do you need? Do you want me to clean your house? I don't care. I'll do it. Like I don't he has to be there. And that wasn't even desperation from like he wouldn't be safe there or he wouldn't learn anything there. It was just desperation from knowing it was a better situation somewhere else. So I
Yes.
can't even imagine. I can just on the tip of the iceberg imagine the desperation of having an unworkable public school tied to a zip code and you can't get your kid out of there and they're pulling charter schools and all this kind of business and you're told you couldn't possibly homeschool and you know
It's a
that's
lot.
it's a lot. It's a lot, and parents do need to be celebrated, and they need to be acknowledged, and shown off so that other parents can see and
Yes.
celebrate.
Yes. Yes, yes. Thank you for that, Lynn. I feel like that was definitely much needed. Trusting yourself. And that's what that's a big message. Like it comes to you for a reason. Trust your gut.
Yeah.
Trust your gut. Trust your gut. Listen, because the love that you have for your child is by far the love that no one else is going to have for your child. Like you are going to love them above and beyond and like you know the most intricate parts of what makes them and what makes them tick, what makes them smile, what makes them laugh, everything. You know that. So don't ever think that your judgment is not what it should be because
Well,
it's
and we're
coming to you
assuming,
for a
at pace,
reason.
we're already coming out of the gate assuming that the parents do know everything, that their gut is
Nice.
what we trust. But I think you make a really important point that it's about also stepping back and acknowledging and celebrating um, the folks that are taking the leap and showing other people so that they feel a little more confident taking the leap as well. Parents
Yes.
are brave and what they're
Yes.
doing for their kids, what they're inventing, what they're acknowledging, what they're creating. It's amazing.
Yes, ma'am. Because that's who I typically talk to on this platform, our parents. Like, it's y'all parents who've said, hey, oh no, I felt like this needed to be changed. So I'm being that change.
Yeah,
Oh, I feel like this needed to be created. So I created it. Oh, I didn't see this for my child. So I built it.
yeah.
Like, those are the conversations I'm having. That's the hope that always brings me to I feel like things are getting better. I know people may be like, oh, it's real dark out here. I'm like, no, I see the light. I see the light, guys.
There's beauty. There's
Yes.
beauty happening all around us. It's about
Yeah,
acknowledging it and savoring it and showing it off. It's all over the place.
indeed. Indeed. I love that. Before I let you go, Lynn, 3 things that you would tell parents if you don't hear anything else, hear this.
You need to be the decision maker for your children's education. Number two, nobody knows your child like you know them. And number three, nobody loves your child as much as you love them. Change the world.
Yes. Yes. Hey, one child at a time. If you got a gang of them, hey, even more odds. But yes, know that your story is valuable. Your narrative is your narrative to write, to create, to build and make it look how it needs to look for your family. So don't ever be afraid to do you. Like your home,
Yeah.
your way. That's how I look at it. So that's that choice, that freedom. Be free, y'all.
You're
Home-
free and you're in charge. Ah.
yeah, right? Homeschool your kids.